Hi everyone, welcome to Tetris and Talking with me, Rolling Redneck. Since it's about Easter, when I'm recording this, let's talk about a concept that I hold dear to my heart, the separation of church and state. Now, a lot of people, including many of my own family, don't understand why I am so in favor of this. That's because many of them were raised in a church that's always whining about how we need to have school prayer to stop mass shootings or whatever. And much of their opposition to church-state separation, like many conservative Christians, is based purely on faith. Like they think that if we just had integrated church and state, God would bless us. Happy days are here again. Blah 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 friggity blah. Now, some people would find my tone off-putting when I talk about how all these people who want to integrate church and state are, at most, really stupid, or at best, actively malicious, or at worst, actively malicious. But here's the thing. Integrating church and state is always bad, whether it be from a practical level or a generalized sanity level. Let's get started with practicality. Let's say we didn't have the separation of church and state. You know, they're able to impose mandatory school prayer or whatever. Question: whose prayers get prayed? No, really. See, the thing about Christianity is there's at least 500 different flavors. Which flavor you subscribe to, if you subscribe to one at all, is up to you. But let's face it, you're never going to get every Christian in a given city to have an agreement on which prayers should be mandatory in schools. Like in the town I was originally from, as far as Christianity goes, we had some mix of uh, evangelical Protestants, uh, various flavors of Catholic, be they Hispanic or Irish or some of the Eastern European Orthodox types. Then you had the people from the various AME black churches. And none of them like each other, I'm sorry. Evangelicals especially have some pretty weird hang-ups about the Catholics. And pretty much whenever they're not whining about abortion or gay marriage, the evangelicals and Catholics get along about as well as cats and dogs after freebasing crystal meth. So basically, if we introduced mandatory school prayer in my original city that I lived in, it would just be 6 months of how dare you make my kids say a rosary? I want my kids praying my prayers, blah 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 blah. Every school board meeting. And nothing productive would get done. So from a practical standpoint, it's better just have this church and state separate, and everybody does their own thing as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else physically. If you're mad that your state is not financing your religious beliefs, uh, go talk to somebody where there's actual Christian persecution, like in China or Iran or whatever. You know, get some perspective in your life. But speaking of Iran, let's talk about the other reason that the separation of church and state is intrinsically good. Iran and all these other Muslim countries where the church and state are pretty much joined at the hip. You know what's funny about them? All the people who live there seem to want to go to places where the church and state are separate, probably because their governments are spending all their money on crazy morality police instead of, things that are actually productive. Like literally anything else, for example. I mean, isn't that weird? All the people who live in places where the church and state are integrated want to go to places where the church and state are separate. Doesn't really bode well for the whole integrating church and state is good for a nation thing. I mean, sure, I get my family and their preachers saying, oh, well, we integrate church and state, not in those exact words. They think that God will bless us or something. But are the places where the church and state are integrated particularly blessed if all of their residents want to leave? I'm just asking. Furthermore, let's talk history here. We have had the church and state integrated in various places throughout history, and it never seems to go well. People were being dragged into wars because the kings were mad at the Pope, other kings were mad at the other king for rejecting the Pope, blah 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 blah, and they were spending literally a century or more fighting over this and dying. And you're telling me that integrating the church and state is a good idea? I mean, just again, go over to the Middle East where the church and state are basically one and the same, and people are being dragged off to war and dying because the, the local rulers can't agree on who Muhammad's successor was or whatever the little Sunni Shia thing's about. People are being dragged off to war and dying. They're having bombs set off at markets. Can anyone, tell me why integrating church and state is a good idea without vaguely saying things like, oh, God will bless us? I want some data, not feelings. But the church state integrationists cannot present data because data doesn't exist. And let's be real here, most of the people who want to get rid of church state separation aren't interested in data or feelings or, making the country good. They want to oppress women. Now, this is something I have said earlier and probably will say again in other videos, but all religions, all of them, hate women. If you're a woman, religion hates you. It hates you, it hates you. Like there is no mechanism for treating women good in any religion at all, even in the much romanticized paganism. Yeah, the pagans were shitty to women too. Like every other, you know, religious rule about women is just designed to demean and oppress them. Hell, we pretty much had the Apostle Paul basically throw out much of early Christianity, which could actually be described as an attempt at very rudimentary feminism. Yeah, Paul threw all that out because the Romans were getting mad. They didn't like all the whole women rushing off to join Christianity thing because Christianity was less work to them than the Roman religion. But seriously, in any country where church and state are integrated, it is not safe to be a woman. Look at the, observations from, various groups like Amnesty International or other human rights groups. All those morality police are basically very, very rapey. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons why you have so many of these traditional, men who want to integrate church and state. They're not interested in God or Jesus. They want an avenue to rape women. They want to be part of the inevitable morality police, and so they can get women, in their interrogation rooms for dressing wrong or whatever, have their way. I mean, it's no coincidence that for most of the men who are against separation of church and state, their social media profiles, but not ranting about God or Jesus, basically read like the inevitable evidence list at a sexual assault trial. Their views on women are not great. Their views on consent are not great. And they want to abolish the separation of church and state because they want to abolish women's rights, especially the right to consent. And yeah, you might say I'm taking, their views on separation of church and state, to an extreme. There is a small chance you might tell me that they're not crazy psychotic rapists. But let's face it, in most of these separate integrated church and state societies, like Iran, Saudi Arabia, etc., most of the rules are aimed specifically at women. Kind of like school uniforms. All the shit is dictating mostly what women can do or wear or whatever. If you're a man in one of those societies, pretty much the only thing you have to do is not hurt the local religious authorities' feelings. If you're a woman, you've got to walk on eggshells just to not be abducted and put in a torture room somewhere. None of the people, at least none of the men, who want to get rid of the separation of church and state have benign intentions. As far as the women who agree with them, let me give you a hint: grow a survival instinct. Because those men who think that integrating church and state, or who tell you that though integrating church and state will make God's blessings happen or something. No, they don't believe that. They just want to get you into their little torture room. But yeah, separation of church and state has is not only good for women, good for practical society, good for avoiding stupid wars. It is basically the only reason that we have a modern functioning society. A society based on reason and logic instead of, you know, walking on eggshells to avoid hurting some preacher, priest, or imam's feelings. And if you don't believe that's a good thing, just compare photos of women in Iran in the 70s to photos of women in Iran to today. And tell me what society you want to live in. And if you sincerely want to live in the kind of society that Iran has, without the separation of church and state, and without basic human rights, uh, go to Iran. Stop trying to force religion into my society. And that's all I got for today. Like and subscribe.